Yes, where are we? I impatiently repeated. But there was no answer still. Will you speak when you are told? Exclaimed my uncle, shaking the urchin by the ears. Come si no me questa e sola. Stromboli, replied the little herd boy, slipping out of Hans' hands, and scudding into the plain across the olive trees. We were hardly thinking of that. Stromboli. What an effect this unexpected name produced upon my mind. We were in the midst of the Mediterranean Sea, on an island of the Aeolian archipelago, in the ancient Strong Isle, where Aeolus kept the winds and the storms chained up, to be let loose at his will. And those distant blue mountains in the east were the mountains of Calabria. And that threatening volcano far away in the south was the fierce Etna. Stromboli, Stromboli. I repeated. My uncle kept time to my exclamations with hands and feet, as well as with words. We seemed to be chanting in chorus. What a journey we had accomplished! How marvelous! Having entered by one volcano, we had issued out of another more than 2,000 miles from Snæfell and from that barren, far-away Iceland. The strange chances of our expedition had carried us into the heart of the fairest region in the world. We had exchanged the bleak regions of perpetual snow and of impenetrable barriers of ice for those of brightness and the rich hues of all glorious things. We had left over our heads the murky sky and cold fogs of the frigid zone to revel under the azure sky of Italy. After our delicious repast of fruits and cold, clear water, we set off again to reach the port of Stromboli. It would not have been wise to tell how we came there. The superstitious Italians would have set us down for fire devils vomited out of hell, so we presented ourselves in the humble guise of shipwrecked mariners. It was not so glorious, but it was safer. On my way I could hear my uncle murmuring. But the compass. That compass. It pointed due north. How are we to explain that fact? My opinion is, I replied disdainfully, that it is best not to explain it. That is the easiest way to shelve the difficulty. Indeed, sir. The occupant of a professorial chair at the Johanneum unable to explain the reason of a cosmical phenomenon. Why, it would be simply disgraceful. And as he spoke, my uncle, half undressed, in rags, a perfect scarecrow, with his leathern belt around him, settling his spectacles upon his nose and looking learned and imposing, was himself again, the terrible German professor of mineralogy. One hour after we had left the Grove of Olives, we arrived at the little port of San Vincenzo, where Hans claimed his 13 weeks' wages, which was counted out to him with a hearty shaking of hands all round. At that moment, if he did not share our natural emotion, at least his countenance expanded in a manner very unusual with him, and while with the ends of his fingers he lightly pressed our hands, I believe he smiled. Chapter 45. All's Well That Ends Well. Such is the conclusion of a history which I cannot expect everybody to believe, for some people will believe nothing against the testimony of their own experience. However, I am indifferent to their incredulity, and they may believe as much or as little as they please. The Stromboliots received us kindly as shipwrecked mariners. They gave us food and clothing. After waiting 48 hours, on the 31st of August, a small craft took us to Messina, where a few days' rest completely removed the effect of our fatigues. On Friday, September the 4th, we embarked on the steamer Volturno, employed by the French Messageries Impériales, and in 3 days more we were at Marseille, having no care on our minds except that abominable deceitful compass, which we had mislaid somewhere and could not now examine, but its inexplicable behavior exercised my mind fearfully. On the 9th of September, in the evening, we arrived at Hamburg. I cannot describe to you the astonishment of Martha or the joy of Grauben. "Now you are a hero, Axel," said to me my blushing fiancé, my betrothed, "you will not leave me again." I looked tenderly upon her, and she smiled through her tears. How can I describe the extraordinary sensation produced by the return of Professor Liedenbrock? Thanks to Martha's ineradicable tattling, the news that the professor had gone to discover a way to the center of the earth had spread over the whole civilized world. People refused to believe it, and when they saw him they would not believe him any the more. Still, the appearance of Hans, and sundry pieces of intelligence derived from Iceland, tended to shake the confidence of the unbelievers. Then my uncle became a great man, and I was now the nephew of a great man, which is not a privilege to be despised. Hamburg gave a grand fete in our honor. A public audience was given to the professor at the Johanneum, at which he told all about our expedition, with only one omission: the unexplained and inexplicable behavior of our compass. On the same day, with much state, he deposited in the archives of the city the now famous document of Saknussemm, and expressed his regret that circumstances over which he had no control had prevented him from following to the very center of the earth the track of the learned Icelander. He was modest notwithstanding his glory, and he was all the more famous for his humility. So much honor could not but excite envy. There were those who envied him his fame, and as his theories, resting upon known facts, were in opposition to the systems of science upon the question of the central fire, he sustained with his pen and by his voice remarkable discussions with the learned of every country. For my part, I cannot agree with his theory of gradual cooling. In spite of what I have seen and felt, I believe, and always shall believe, in the central heat. But I admit that certain circumstances not yet sufficiently understood may tend to modify and places the action of natural phenomena. While these questions were being debated with great animation, my uncle met with a real sorrow. Our faithful Hans, in spite of our entreaties, had left Hamburg. The man to whom we owed all our success and our lives too would not suffer us to reward him as we could have wished. He was seized with the mal de pays, a complaint for which we have not even a name in English. Farvel, said he one day, and with that simple word he left us and sailed for Reykjavik, which he reached in safety. We were strongly attached to our brave eiderdown hunter, though far away in the remotest north. He will never be forgotten by those whose lives he protected, and certainly I shall not fail to endeavor to see him once more before I die. To conclude, I have to add that this journey into the interior of the earth created a wonderful sensation in the world. It was translated into all civilized languages. The leading newspapers extracted the most interesting passages, which were commented upon, picked to pieces, discussed, attacked, and defended with equal enthusiasm and determination, both by believers and skeptics. Rare privilege. My uncle enjoyed during his lifetime the glory he had deservedly won, and he may even boast the distinguished honor of an offer from Mr. Barnum, to exhibit him on most advantageous terms in all the principal cities in the United States.